Oh no, I did it again. I forgot to change the text in the countdown. Well, hello everybody. Welcome back. I am Colin from Salt of the Streets, and welcome back to another Friday night beer show over here in the Salt of the Street studio. We've got a fantastic show on deck for today, which I have entitled The Grift, because due to all the things that have been going on in the internet space this past week, especially in the last couple weeks. Grifters are all about, and we need to talk about grifters and our seemingly endless attachment to them as they come along into our lives. So we'll be talking about all sorts of grifters. We'll be talking just a touch on what hopefully will be the closeout to the Steven Crowder Daily Wire drama, but we're not going to touch too much onto that because we're going to rehash that entire topic on the show tomorrow. We'll be talking about free speech and Eliza Blue and how the two of those things go together, because they don't. And then we'll be talking about some other grifters that I think we should all recognize and take a look at, and all that kind of good stuff. So we will be doing that here over the next half hour or so. Donovan, I see you in the chat. Let's go. Let's do it. But before we get into any and all of that today, just a friendly reminder to make sure your notification bell is on this YouTube channel here, because tomorrow at noon we are going to be going live. Donovan's going to be in the studio. We're going to be going live with Salt of the Streets podcast episode 141. It's going to be a big show. So we'll be talking about a lot of stuff on there. Deborah, what's up? Happy Friday. So let's, before we get into the preview of tomorrow's episode, let's go ahead and crack ourselves a beer. This is another very, very special beer to kick off the Friday. And this is from my local brewery. Can't see it because we're really bad at, actually, the light's in the way. There we go. Either way, you can't see it, but it's from my favorite brewery. And this is the last can in existence of this beer that is unopened. It's called the Fresh Hop Beer de Garde, and it's a Belgian-style, really hoppy ale. It's stupid good. And this is the last can in existence, and now it's been opened. They still have a little bit of it left at the brewery in the keg, but I think we're on our last keg, and it's soon to be gone until hopefully next year when it makes its triumphant return. Woo! I'm very excited about this. I've been waiting all week to have this last beer with you guys. So happy Friday, everybody. It's been a one hell of a week. Good God, we had so much stuff happen this week. We got massive Project Veritas videos. Definitely going to be talking about that tomorrow. I don't know exactly where we're going to do it, but we're going to do it because it's, it broke the internet. Thank you, James O'Keefe. And then, of course, the follow-up video to the original Project Veritas video. And then we had Paul Pelosi's, the body cam footage from the police officer finally came out today after being ordered by a court to be released. So that's going to be exciting. If you guys have not seen that, it's something. It's something. It's some wild shit. We'll just put it that way. So Donovan and I watched it today at work, and it was wild. It was wild. So we're doing that. But as per kind of our usual deal, we're kind of doing some more local stories, some national stories, some international stories, and then, of course, our lovely grab bag segment. We'll be talking about COVID updates. There's all sorts of stuff going on there. In the local section, we'll be talking about some of that. Our lovely state of Washington did an audit on the COVID spending, which I think is just going to be probably a good indication of what most other states are doing with their COVID spending. And, should be no surprise that there's millions of dollars that are unaccounted for. So that's fun. And then we've got a bunch of tech company layoffs. And obviously being this close to Seattle, that hits our economy in our state really, really, really hard. So we'll be talking about some of those. In the national segment, we've got all sorts of new info on the classified document fiasco that's been going on. There's stuff going on there. We've got a high school in Virginia that is denying merit-based awards to certain students, and it should surprise nobody that they are indeed of Asian descent. because that's been a thing that's been happening in schools lately. And then we've got, the California shooting. McCarthy, Speaker of the House, kind of flexed some OG muscles the other day. So there's some stuff going on with there we'll get into. And then, of course, we're going to branch out to some more international stories. Ukraine is obviously a massive, massive topic right now with the sending of the tanks and all sorts of other stuff going on there. So we'll get into that. Canada, we'll be talking about Canada and their lovely adoption of this state-sponsored suicide stuff. So we'll be doing all sorts of that. And then grab bag is always, you know that, it's always wild. That's probably when we're going to talk about the closeout of the Crowder Daily Wire stuff. Alec Baldwin, we've talked about him on the show before. Alec Baldwin, we got some court movement on that one, so that'll be interesting. We've got some stuff about the Dobbs SCOTUS leak that happened way back, and, you know, a bunch of other stuff. We'll see what we get into. But today we're going to start off by drinking some of this beer because I'm thirsty now. Oh, it's just so good. It's smooth and refreshing, but it's got like that Belgian-y twist to it with lots and lots of hops. I love this beer. 6.7% too. It's got a nice little Friday evening ABV. That's what we want. Ooh, and I got some really fun beers at another brewery today on my way home for the show tomorrow. So that'll be really fun to see some of those. There's some goofy stuff in there, but it all is super tasty. So anyways, make sure tomorrow, noon, Pacific Standard Time. I'm pretty sure we're there now. Pacific Time, noon, right here, Salt the Streets. Donovan will be here. We'll be doing episode 141, and it's going to be fantastic. So for today, we are going to close out our small discussion that we had last week. Last week, if you haven't watched it, I did the entire thing on the Crowder Wars between him and Daily Wire. And to kind of cap off the main event, cap off the entire deal, he was on Timcast on Monday. And, of course, we watched it. We have lots of spicy takes. But as far as we're concerned today, there's nothing major that happened. There was some things that came up that we'll talk about. We'll save that for tomorrow's podcast. But why is Steven Crowder in this episode about grifters? Well, it's because I think he's a grifter. I think he is I think he's a guy who pretends like he's a self-made commentator when really he's like an on-air talent. And he has a massive, massive, massive cult following. I mean, I've enjoyed Crowder. I mean, on this very show, I talked about the whole, what was his website, the mugclubforever.com and all this good stuff while I was shopping around a show, and may or may not go independent, which I think he's pretty much going to have to do at this point because he burned a lot of bridges there. But I just don't understand the cult-like following of his followers throughout social media and on the internet, just bending over backwards, looking every single way to defend this guy, and where he needs defending, he can be defended. Deborah says a card-carrying SAG member he is. Yes, he is. Yeah, he used to do he was a child actor, if you will. He was a voice actor in that show Arthur, which I never really saw when I was growing up. I feel like I saw bits and pieces, but obviously it's a thing that I think he talks about it in the Timcast episode too. I'm pretty sure it's either that or he did it in the after show, the members only after show. But yeah, he is a card carrying member of the Screen Actors Guild, which is, you know, that's always fun. So yeah, he's an actor. I mean, that's what he does. He's an on-air talent, and he kind of always has been. I just don't get why you can't call him out on shit when he needs to be called out on. Nobody's safe, man. Nobody gets to just get away with murder. Nobody gets to do that in today's internet age. It's not okay. You can defend him on, you know, a lot of aspects in this whole endeavor that him and the Daily Wire have been going through. I know I probably have, and I still have certain things that I definitely agree with him on in this particular scenario. But the tactics, the way he's going about it, and all this stuff. Like, if you are a fan of Crowder and you can't see and call out the bad shit he's doing when he's doing the bad shit, you gotta get over that. You just gotta get over that, and it doesn't stop at Crowder. It's going to touch everybody we talk about today and more, which also doesn't mean that grifters can't have a road to redemption, if you will. Doesn't mean that, like, with time and input from their part, they can't rebuild trust and actually become somebody you can have a little bit more trust in and stuff like that. But I think, particularly in this day and age, we like to find these online personalities. We like to find these internet personalities and things like that, especially in the commentary world, that we really like and we really agree with and stuff like that. And next thing you know, we kind of find ourselves lulled into a safe space of not questioning things that they do or say, or just taking them at face value and not trying to look behind to break the fourth wall a little bit and see how things are running behind the scenes. He's not on the list, but I'll just go ahead and talk about him now. At this point, Tim Pool is no different in this particular way. There are hundreds of hours now of videos of former employees and including family members and shit like that talk about how much of a fucking dick Tim Pool is. And it's probably pretty easy to see that on the show at certain points in time. But I mean, some people are just like that, man, and you can't fall in love with their screen presence and assume that they're not a real person behind, when the camera's off. Weird stuff you hear about Tim Pool. Obviously, the beanie for one. I mean, come on, I get what you're an on-screen guy and you can't take the beanie off because you're bald, and we've all seen the pictures and stuff like that. But like, I just don't understand why somebody can't own up to something like that, or if you're gonna play into this thing, and it's a whole deal. I want the receipts and the full story from DW and Crowder. Well, Donovan, go back and watch last week's episode. I want the receipts and the full story from Daily Wire and Crowder. Yeah, we'll do that tomorrow for sure. But yeah, up to the IRL appearance with Crowder, we went through all of that, including timelines and everything last episode here on the Beer Show. So feel free, everybody, to go. Oh, I mean for them, he says. I don't want to rehash the entire thing. We're going to go over it tomorrow. We're just touching on this because Crowder's kind of a grifter. So what we talked about, Tim Pool. And this led to something that kind of blew up a big portion of the internet this week, regarding Eliza Blue, who was also on Timcast relatively recently. And she's been making the rounds a lot over the last, 6 to 9 months or something like that. And, she is a advocate for survivors of human trafficking, as she discusses every time she goes on someplace. And she has kind of caused this big Twitter free speech kind of outrage particularly over just the last week. It's been pretty fast and hard. The major thing that was set off, I got a tweet that I ran into from somebody I follow called Melanie Mack, formerly of GameStop TV, I do believe, saying that the Quartering, Jeremy from the Quartering, was banned on Twitch. And that kind of got my hackles up, so I started to dig and find out. You follow a couple of these hashtags, free the Quartering, free Brittany Venti. And I'm like, well, what is that all about? And it all ties back to Eliza Blue. Very long story that has many, 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 many layers that don't necessarily have to do with what we're talking about today. And it's a lot of kind of drama, and people's histories are involved, and it's very, very shady stuff. But ultimately, it leads to a more important conversation about how somebody who appears to be about free speech, talks about free speech a lot, and the importance of human trafficking, sticking up for people that are victims of human trafficking and stuff like that, polling very large, strong voices about free speech off of Twitter, because of them sharing some public information that is not appreciated on her part. And it's taken down multiple people now at this point, and it's becoming quite an issue, right? And the reason this kind of spans the grifting kind of realm is because Eliza Blue has been very big on a lot of podcasts, from Michael Malice to multiple appearances on Tim Pool at this point. What's her name? Christy Mayer's podcast. She's had her on a bunch of times. I mean, she is all around. She got really big into Twitter when Elon Musk was first taking over Twitter. And a lot of the Twitter files were coming out, and it was looking as if Twitter executives, primarily Yoel Roth, were kind of looking the other way with like some CP type stuff and some trafficking type hashtags and things like that that were happening on the platform, and they were kind of looking away. All at the same time, the vice president of trust and safety at Twitter was trying to advocate for like really taking action on these accounts and so on and so forth. And the two of them kind of hooked up at one point after Elon took over the platform and really started to like take down a ton of, like CP stuff and a lot of really kind of like creeper hashtags and stuff like that related to human trafficking, and did a big service for Twitter. Hence, got a really good contact at Twitter. And then when somebody goes by the name Brittany Venti, posted some things about, oh no, that's not the right one. Oh, that's just hashtag free Brittany venting. But she was the first one that got that Eliza got pulled off because she shared some of Eliza Blue's more risque photos from her past, back when she used to be a cam girl and when she was in World Star hip hop music videos in very risque outfits and stuff like that. And asked her a question. I'm like, how do you account for your past like this, if this is what you're into now, blah, 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 blah. There were some timeline questions being brought up, and then next thing you know, Brittany Venti was pulled off Twitter. Jeremy from the Quartering, hashtag free the Quartering, decided to stick up for Brittany Venti and say, well, this is publicly available information. Why can't you do this? Why can't we talk about this? And then he shared her post, and then boom, also gets locked out of his Twitter account. And it's also happened to another couple people since then. And so now there's a ton of people trying to get Elon to like, why are we banning people for sharing publicly available information? And it kind of all comes back to possible relationships with Eliza Blue and the executives over at New Twitter. But this is a problem because it's not being addressed outright by anybody involved at this point. And we're watching what was marketed as the new free speech Twitter essentially just kind of have a bunch of people pulled off, deplatformed, because reasons at this point that we don't understand. And for somebody that is this powerful and this upcoming in this type of space, Eliza Blue recently spoke out a lot about Andrew Tate and his takedown over in Romania, having to do with some possible human trafficking. She claims to represent one of the people involved in his organization. That's a victim of his, I should add. And she's out here advocating for all these people to be pulled off of Twitter. She's threatening to sue these people if they won't like delete these tweets and so on and so forth. And it's getting really, really messy. And so how does this relate to the grifting aspect of things that we're talking about? It's, again, people have fallen in love with this person for a long time, and they put her up on this pedestal, and now it's looking like there's something nasty behind the curtain here. It's, I've liked Eliza Blue every time I've seen her on various podcasts and stuff like that. I like the overall message that she's doing. But at the end of the day, what she's going to be remembered for at this point is running around trying to get a bunch of popularity for these things that she's advocating for, whether or not there's money involved. I would just assume just because, with popularity on the internet comes money. But, You know, if in the wake of this legacy, you're going to be stomping on a bunch of people's free speech on Twitter, there's no defense of that. You can't just carry on through this entire thing without addressing that. It's odd that she is supposed to be a victim advocate, has a background as a video dancer. She's putting herself out there to be objectified. Yeah, and there's even more problematic issues with that, Deborah, when you look at the timeline of all these things. Never really spoke to the claims about being trafficked when she's made examples of what she sees as human trafficking. It doesn't really necessarily fit the same kind of picture that most people would assume when they think of human trafficking. But that, at the end of the day, there are going to be a lot of people that are in that particular world that are being exploited pretty heavily. And if they feel like they're in a position they can't escape that, I'm for somebody being on their side, trying to advocate for them to be out, to get away from that lifestyle and that world. And that's fine if they don't want to be there. And if that's what she's doing, I can get behind that. I don't know if I would want to call it human trafficking. And then if that's the world that you were in, and if that's what you're referring to as human trafficking, and you being human trafficked during that time period when you were a cam girl, I would like to know that. That seems kind of grifty to me at this point, right? It's just a lot of the trust in these people are being shaken by a lot of folks. And it's so easy when you see these people on podcasts and you follow them on social media. We all got to remember we're only getting like one or two sides of who they really are, like what they're presenting to the world. And then when something comes along like this Eliza Blue situation, you start digging deeper and deeper and deeper, and you start finding out a lot of crazy, crazy, crazy things. Starts to get weird. So who else do we want to talk about? Let's see here. That's Brittany Venti right there. And she's a YouTuber, social media person. She was the original one that asked Eliza a question and then got pulled down. But here's another good one. Let's actually, if you guys remember this was back from a show that was formerly put on Blaze TV. That was called You Are Here, with Eliza Schaefer and Sydney Watson. And there was an appearance with somebody who used to be a regular guest on Timcast IRL, Jack Murphy. And there was a slight incident on the show, which went a little like this.
Could you please clear up the cuck article you wrote?
I am not going to talk about this.
Okay.
And basically, you know what? Fuck you for bringing this up right here and right now. Why are you doing this to me?
I didn't know that. I didn't know what it was.
Well,
so that was a whole deal. So he gets very upset when Sydney reads a super chat asking about a cuck article that Jack Murphy wrote, apparently. Bilbo's in the chat. What's up, buddy? Brittany is based as F. And I didn't, before this whole thing went down between her and Eliza, I had no idea who she was, but I have since entered that world, and I can confirm she is indeed based. I miss You Are Here. It was a good show for a while, man. It was a good show. I was there from episode 1 until Sydney got off the show, and then I quit watching it because I'm more a fan of Sydney Watson than I was Eliza Schaefer. But Jack Murphy, this guy was, I used to like Jack Murphy. I fall victim to this kind of thing just like everybody else does. I really liked his message of like masculinity and trying to be self-sufficient and work hard and do your best for your family and so on and so forth. A really good message, very good conversationalist. He had interesting points, interesting takes. I was a big fan. Didn't know anything else about him other than him coming on Timcast and then doing a few other shows back in the other day. And then after this video, everyone's like, well, I was like, what do you mean cuck article? What is this talking about? And as it turns out, back in 2015, he wrote an article talking about, cultivating erotic energy from a surprising source. And what he's talking about is at this, I'll just read the first part. It's pretty interesting. It'll just set up the rest of the article for you, and then we'll move on because it's a whole deal. He said, today I sent my adoring, loyal, young, hot girlfriend of 2 years to have sex with a stranger from Tinder. She is currently at his apartment, checking in with me via text and as presumably sucking and fucking her way to a good time. I'm alone writing. Couldn't be happier. And he goes on to talk about, his take on the entire world of this type of relationship. And that's fine. And this is back, I believe, in the day before he wrote his big debut book, Democrat to Deplorable. Let me see when that came out real quick. Democrat to Deplorable. He used to be a hardcore Democrat and then came out as like a hardcore Trump supporter. Yeah, let's see here. Democrat to Deplorable by Jack Murphy, 2018. So yeah, it's before that era. It's kind of, he used to be a leftist. We'll put it that way. He's a very progressive leftist back in the day, and that's the lifestyle he was living. And like many people, he lived a very alternative lifestyle, and he was kind of going with it. But the problem was, in his current persona in the early, in 2019 or whenever that video originally happened, that was the complete polar opposite of what his persona currently was. And at that point, he's essentially labeled a grifter because you're not who you say you are. Mind you, I don't necessarily agree with that situation because I don't like the way he acted during that time, obviously. And if he was a real man that really lived the values he espouses continually to this day, he would have manned up to it and said that was a different part of my life, and that is not who I am anymore. I learned a lot of hard lessons, blah, 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 and actually stood up for what he said, what he used to believe in. But obviously he didn't do that. He went on a serious rampage and blocking and reporting people and blah, blah, blah. And it got really nasty for a long time. And then everything kind of went quiet for a while. And now he's slowly kind of doing his old thing again. So, which is in his power to do. But again, this stuff continues to happen all over the sphere of internet personalities. Dave Rubin, when he first came out, I don't want to say came out, but he started to, I think he really broke through when he did his video, When I Left the Left, or Why I Left the Left, and then kind of started his whole internet independent career, which has since kind of blown up and then kind of shrunk back down. But he's always been a massive advocate for free speech and for independent creators and so on and so forth. And he used to be big. He used to work for mainstream media. He used to work in big corporate media. I don't remember exactly which networks, but he had some kind of involvement with 60 Minutes, I believe, or something with Larry King. I know he was one of his favorite people and one of his mentors and stuff like that. But at one point he decided, because free speech and deplatforming was such a problem at the time, he wanted to start his own platform, and he got some investors together and did the whole thing, trying to be relevant. Murphy. Yeah, it's a whole deal. But I looked it up today. I haven't followed Jack Murphy in a while. But, I took a look at his Twitter feed and stuff, and he's still, he's kind of doing what he was doing at that time again. He's kind of doing the masculinity thing. I think he's got some kind of gym thing going on right now, some workout type stuff. And, he's still doing what he had set out to do, which, good on him. I'm glad if this is the life he's living now and he's walked away from that old life and it doesn't look like he's living a double life anymore, then good for him. I'm glad he's not doing that anymore, and he's more or less living the values. But to react that way when somebody brings up your past like this that you find uncomfortable, I can understand that for sure as a human being. But if you're a public person, if you're out there in the public and you're on shows with millions of people watching them, hundreds of thousands of people watching them, stuff like that comes up, you just got to recognize your past for what it is. Go back to the Eliza Blue situation. You should not be getting people deplatformed because they're sharing publicly available like images from your former life. If it was that big a deal to you, you could have struck down those videos a long time ago from their original sources and so on and so forth. And then you could just be like, hey, that's not me anymore. That was former life. And you could just move on. You could accept what it was that you did in the past, and then you could move on and continue to do what you're doing. I think people would have a lot more respect for you. But when you just try to deplatform people or silence them because of something that you are not proud of in your past, that's an issue. So back to Dave Rubin. Dave Rubin starts locals.com, a massively successful tech endeavor that gave a lot of independent creators essentially some kind of platform they could go and do their thing. They can have subscriptions, and it's a nice private platform for social media and community building and all that stuff, where creators would not have to worry about being deplatformed by big tech. And it was Dave's company. That was his ethos. That's what he was going to do. That's great. Well, eventually, he turned around and sold it. He sold the company off. So I think he still has some kind of creative control in this thing, and he's still got stake in it, but he sold it off to another big company, which happens to be somewhat of an up-and-coming, and he sold it off to Rumble. A lot of people got very upset about this. I can understand if you're going to create a free speech platform, if there's some other company out there that you can sell it to, Rumble would be the company to do that. But even then, a lot of people felt betrayed by this, and a lot of people quit supporting him after this because he had kind of, in their eyes, backed away from something that he said he was going to do. Joseph, he was a dick to Sid. He definitely had a stick up his ass. Amen, dude. Well, or something else. I highly recommend everybody read that article. It is interesting, especially if the only Jack Murphy you knew was kind of like the Timcast IRL, Blaze level Jack Murphy. It got very, very interesting. Let's see. Who else did we want to talk about? I think that was about it. Those were the major guys I wanted to hit. Let me consult my notes real quick. Is there anybody else that I wanted to hear that I think are grifters? You guys in the chat, tell me who you guys think are grifters these days. Somebody that you need to watch. Candace Owens. Oh, my God. Candace Owens. I just recently discovered this one. I forgot about this altogether. Back in Candace Owens' beginning days, the reason she's came up recently is because, obviously, as soon as this Daily Wire Crowder issue was going on, she was scheduled to go on Timcast. And so it was like right during the heat of the moment. Timing could have been more perfect, and she's on there, and we talked about it a lot on last week's episode too. So again, for all the info on all this, all the cuts, you can actually go get all the info in last week's episode of the Beer Show. But she went hard at Crowder, real hard, and called him a lot of really bad shit, and went hard AF at this guy, made a lot of accusations, so on and so forth. And well, that got the internet doing what the internet does best with their little sleuthing skills, and reached back into her past as a public figure and found some very troubling things about her. Jeremy from The Quartering has a great series of videos on all of this that he's put out over the last week. And he details this call, or I think it was in one of her first episodes, where she had on, let me pull up his thing here, The Quartering, The Quartering. And she, on her first Candace Owens show, she had on one of her friends who was a conservative personality, and seemingly somebody that she was very friendly with. And let's see here, Candace Owens destroyed. What was her name?
Step count.
No free ads. No free ads for you. I know Jeremy Quartering, but you have Coffee Brand Coffee. You don't need free ads. So yeah, he goes into great detail on this and covers the entire situation on Candace Owens. But there's a clip on here I want to try to pull up of Candace Owens alluding to herself recording phone calls with somebody that she considered a friend, something she talked shit about Crowder on while she was on Timcast IRL.
Restraining order against.
Conversations that we had private.
Now this is like the audio is garbo because I think it's just recording an
Can't
open
confirm.
mic. I think you can make it out. So here's the receipt.
I'm saying,
No, absolutely not.
Why not?
You can't post our private combos.
okay, why not?
Who does that?
Because you're saying I'm lying, so it just sort of seems, like, you know, first you're saying that I'm lying, and now you're saying that I can't. Which phone call?
The one yesterday.
So here's Nicole Arbor. She asked Candace Owens point blank after Candace is like saying, "Hey, well, I could drop some receipts."
Anyway, she goes on to say, like, what do you mean receipts? Like, well, are you recording our conversations? And she just alludes, she smiles real big and then just like, well, let's go to the next topic, and then moves on. So obviously some pretty shady shit there. She also, way back when she was first coming up in her early days, Red Pill Black, back when she was known as Red Pill Black, Cardi got more live views from Tim than I have seen in a long time. Amen. Amen. There was a ton of people watching that stream live, and I was one of them. I will confirm. But yeah, Candace Owens had this tech startup that she was trying to get off the ground back in the early days of, it's like right before Gamergate went down. A lot of people say this thing kind of helped lead to Gamergate, but it's called Social Autopsy. That essentially Social Autopsy was going to be, it's an online internet database that gleaned the internet for people's personal information that was available on the internet. Anything that was public and you could find if you did some sleuthing was going to be there. And people essentially gathered up all these information, and there was a database of people that were thought to be saying bad things, that were being involved in what she would describe as a hate speech, and created a giant list of all this stuff, which after a little while people realized she was creating a database for doxing. Essentially, there may not have been addresses and phone numbers, but everything else you could find you would want on somebody, you could find it on Social Autopsy there. And her intent was essentially for all the internet bullies that are, involved in hate speech on the internet to be able to be found out and to be called out. So she wanted to bully the bullies via this giant database system that she had on. And once people realized what it was, the entire company just kind of fell apart because people were like, we're not going to be involved in this. This is terrible. And this is at the early days. Like I said, it was like right before Gamergate went down. And she's never really apologized for wanting to do that. And now she's in she's at the most conservative media company, most powerful conservative media company that's out there on the internet. Seems weird. Seems kind of like a little bit of a grift, if you ask me. So, again, there's nothing wrong with people being where they're at and having made these types of mistakes in their past, but man, it tells me you gotta be really cautious with these personalities that become very, very popular, because we do not know them. We don't know them at all. We see them a lot. They put out a lot of content. They talk about things that we relate to, things that we care about, and they might have good messages. I don't want to say it's necessarily just confirmation bias, because a lot of the people that I really like, I don't necessarily agree with. But, there's a level of trust that gets built between these commentators, these pundits, whatever you want to call them, these creators, if you will, and their audiences. But you can't let yourself be fooled into a false sense of security and then assume that they're always going to be doing the right thing, or they always have done the right thing, because everybody's human, man. Everybody's humans. Everybody, last night, yesterday was on Hotep Jesus's website, was a little award show that he's been doing now. I think it was the third one, called the Grifties. Let's pull this up. Maybe they have listings from who won the Grifties last night. thegrifties.com. It was pretty amazing. Here we go. So 30 annual Grift, and it's an awesome award show that they do on their YouTube channel. And I mean, it is done like an award show. Get up there and they, just like any other award show. I mean, he's standing in front of a green screen, but then they give out all these crazy awards for female Grifty, who the nominees were, and then they have all sorts of different people from around the internet. They send them all letters and stuff like that, and then Ye won. Oh, there you go, Deborah. There it is, Grifty of the Year. I love it. So yeah, it's really awesome. If you guys are interested in any of that, it's a great like joke take on all the things. You can go on there and you could have upvoted different people in different categories, and it was just a really good time. A really, really fun little project they put on. But it kind of pokes fun at the idea of being a grifter, because you could be a grifter in a lot of different ways. You can have a good grift, you can have a bad grift. I mean, but it really got me thinking that it just means you got to be careful who we're watching and who we're putting all of our blind support behind, because it's the internet, man. We're only getting one side of these types of people. That's just the way it is. That's the way the internet works, man. You could watch hundreds of hours of somebody's podcast. I'd appreciate if you did that to our podcast. But you could watch hundreds of hours of video of somebody on the internet, and you will never truly know who these people are, because they're presenting something to a camera. There's various levels of authenticity, but you know, not everybody's going to get on there and yay. Did I call him Yee? I do that all the time. His name's Kanye West, for God's sakes. I refuse to bow down to Ye. Refuse. I have a dead name, Kanye West, all day long. He's a fascinating human being, that guy. So anyways, yes. Just be careful how much support you put behind all your favorite people out there on the internet. Appreciate them for who they are and what they're doing. But, you know, just be cautious. Just be cautious. That's the message for today. And that, of course, is the show for today. Thank you all very much for joining me. Be sure to follow us on our socials. Donovan is at alpaca_Donovan and at Salt of the Street on Twitter. I am on at Big Bird Offie on all the things. We are also at Salt of the Streets on all the things. Patreon.com/Salt of the Streets. That's where you go to get all of our awesome newsletters that we put out every month. We got a new one coming up here in just a few short days. So look forward to that. I'll be talking a little bit about business in mine, and particularly relating to like Crowder Daily Wire situation. It should be pretty interesting. So we're going to go into that. I do not have any clue what Donovan's writing about, so that's always a really fun thing for me, because I enjoy reading his writing. He's a very good writer, and I really appreciate not knowing what he's writing about, because it's always a big surprise. So if you want that, make sure to go over to Patreon, subscribe, do that whole deal, and then be here tomorrow at noon for episode 141 of the Salt of the Streets podcast. Once again, I am your host of the Friday Night Beer Show. I am Colin, a.k.a. at Big Bird Offie from Salt of the Streets, and I will see you all tomorrow. Have a great rest of your Friday, everybody.